later. So now that's a string literal, right? So numeric literals, let's quickly talk about numeric literals because I only talk about, for now, I'm only going to talk about numeric and strings and Boolean. Once we get to lists, sets, tuples, dictionaries, we'll come back to that in the next video, okay? So then you have a float, right? Okay, let's start with the integer. Let's start with an integer. So what is an integer, right? An integer essentially is a whole number, right? And it can be signed, right? Signed when I say it can be a negative number as well, okay? So if I want to, this is a string literal, or this is an integer literal, sorry, excuse me. And that is an int, right? So let's comment 1, 2, 3, or negative 12. 1, 2, 3, right? And that is also an int. We can do that's an int, and that is an int, right? So we can do operations on these, right? We'll get to that now in the next step. And then we have floats, right? But now we can forget about complex as well because I'm not going to use them anytime soon. So floats, right? Let's make this a comment. Let's say I want to store my weight. So I went to the gym today and I weighed myself and I was weighing about on the scale. And yeah, in kilograms, right? So that is an example of a float. And you can also have a negative float, right? Let's say you're doing some calculations and you end up with a negative factor of that, and then that is, let's put it to pretty significant numbers. So there, these are examples of floats, right? So let's continue on our variables. Now, what is a variable? Let's quickly go back to the slide. We'll come back to it. What is a variable? Now, a variable is essentially a placeholder for storing information. If you look on the left or on the right here, I have this envelope and I've titled this envelope the best team. And I'm saying that Liverpool FC, I'm going to assign that to this envelope and store it there as the best team, right? So it can be named anything, but keep it relevant and meaningful, hence best team, right? So I had to keep it relevant and meaningful. No spaces in the variable name. So I couldn't put a space between best and team. That would violate the naming conventions, right? It's good practice to have names start with the lowercase letter. Can't have variables with the same name. It gets to that. And names should not clash with Python reserved names, right? So they're already stored. So they've been reserved by Python to do something. So you can't name your variable there because there will be a clash when it's time to run the program. So you look here, this is how you assign a variable. I say best team is equals to Liverpool FC. So essentially, I create a string literal of Liverpool FC and assign this to best team. And when I say print, remember print outputs something to the terminal, right? Outputs and inputs to the terminal. Here is the input is our variable that is storing Liverpool FC. And I've added a string to it saying is the best team. Okay, so we can get into that. Pep 8. So this is the style guide for Python code. It's essentially a standard for how to write your code in Python. I know this is an introductory lesson, but it would be good for you to know about this, and so that when you start learning how to write Python programs, you follow this convention, okay? And variables, okay, so that's the end of the slides. So let's now get back to um, that example. So over here, I'm going to say best team, right? It's just a comment. So I'm going to say best, and I'm going to actually rename that from how I did it and use Pep 8. Best team is Liverpool FC. Now I'm going to use the print function. Remember I said the print function takes in an input, right? And out returns it to the terminal. This here where you can see it over here. So I'm going to say best team. And what we should see is hello world on the top, and followed by that, because we're not sending anything else besides line 27 to the terminal, we should see Liverpool FC. So I run the file. I click on this button over here. That's not the only way you can run files in Python, but I just wanted to show this. But if you can, we'll do the other way. Okay, so as you can see, it's now out on the terminal. Okay, so how can we use Python as a calculator? All right, so let us think about some integers. All right, I've shown you a string literal that I've assigned to a variable called best team. Now, let's say I wanted to store my age, or you wanted to store your age. How would we go about that? Right, so I'd say my age. I'll say my age. It's just a comment. So my age, what is my age? I'm just gonna say 52. Yeah, okay. So essentially now I have stored this integer literal into this variable called my age. So anytime I call my age, I will see it on the terminal, or I'm referring to this value stored here, my age. And if we run that, we should see 52 as well. But you know what? I will show you how to run a Python file on your terminal. So we go to, so you write exit on your terminal, you write Python, and then the name of the file, which is first program. And we see 52 there, okay? So that is how you run in the terminal. And I think I'll continue doing this from now on so you guys can get used to running stuff in the terminal. Okay. Okay, let's get back to it. Now, so the same, let's say I want to define a float. All right. So let's think about a float. First thing that comes to mind, price of fuel. Okay. I think it's currently 24.14, 193. So that is a float, right? So now I've stored the price of floats in a variable, right? Now imagine if I wanted to calculate the price, if I wanted to calculate how much it would cost me to travel to Johannesburg from Durban, right? Now I can do that in Python, all right? So now we start thinking about doing calculations, right, with Python. But let's save that. This is just for you to think about. Let's save that for later, right? So that's a float. Let me show you what another float is. A float could, now you see this, I said with a fractional component. However, this is also a float. Excuse the name there, but this is also a float. So if I was 20.0, as long as there's a dot, full stop and or a dot and a number after that dot, we have a float, okay? And another float as well, a float is, let's, in scientific notation, we can have something like e to the 5. And if I was to print that out, let's print that out so that I can show you. a float 2. And like I said, I'm going to use the terminal, run that, and you can see that is the output. So that is also a float. Okay. Now we have Boolean literals. Okay. Boolean literals, there are only two. That's true or rather true and false. Okay. Those are the only values in the Boolean literal. All right. So now you can use this to compare values for conditional statements. You know, if you wanted to compare two values together, let's say A is the namings, right? Comparison. Let's just say A. Okay. A is equals to, and I'm going to see is 5 greater than 10, right? And that's how you do the that comparison operator, greater than, right? From mathematics, and you can see that if I now print, what should be the value? Is 5 greater than 10? No, it's not. So we should get something called, there should be a false, right? And if we look, okay, I guess I use the, so anyway, false, right? And then we have basic operators in Python. So I am going to show, let's write a quick program. Just going to remove all of this. Right. So remember we said fuel price. Fuel price is equals to 24.14. Right. And I say, what is the distance to let's say Durban to distance, right? And I say that as, what is that? It's 600 kilometers, okay? 600 kilometers. Now you don't put in kms here, all right? That is not how you do it in Python. You just put it at 600. And then if for readability's sake, you can even have a comment there. Actually, that would be good. Then you can say something like distance. I don't think like how you spell distance. Distance to Johannesburg from, well, let's just say between JHB and Durban, right? In kilometers, right? So that everybody knows. So now let's make a calculation. If I want to say I traveled here